right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks.
Hi everyone, I'm so delighted that you've decided to join me today for the kickoff of a brand new series I'm calling Experiencers Speak. Over the years, I've had the honor of meeting so many individuals who have shared their own extraordinary journeys into the unusual, not the least of which is contact with non-human intelligence. So many of these individuals have expressed their sense of loneliness, of isolation, and of fear of being ridiculed or worse, fear of being considered delusional. Well, listen, I'm here to tell you they are not. You are not. We must begin a more consistent dialogue about what I've called the proverbial elephant in the room, especially when it comes to our own encounters with high strangeness. Because I have a funny feeling there are a heck of a lot more people out there having experiences than what we would like to admit. So, in that vein, we're going to begin a more consistent dialogue here at Higher Journeys, where you will hear from more of these experiencers and learn more about these extraordinary encounters. And hopefully, one day, we as a collective can and will embrace this as a very real part of our shared reality. Well, speaking of extraordinary, the person that you're about to meet is a name you may not recognize because for years, her incredible story of alien abduction, paranormal encounters, and other areas of high strangeness was documented notably by the late ET contact researcher and hypnotherapist Bud Hopkins under the pseudonym of Kathy Davis. This woman's account was so incredibly bizarre, so incredibly curious, that it was Hopkins' landmark book called Intruders, I'm sure you've heard of that was based on her story, which is centered around a life-changing event that took place on June 30th of 1983. Now, at 62 years of age, Debra Jordan-Kauble, her real name, is telling all like never before in a brand new book entitled Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders. As I have become more familiar with Debra's story and her Odyssey-ridden life, I'd call it, that breaks just about every rule as to how reality is supposed to work, I'm reminded yet again that life itself is filled with mystery. But as participants in this labyrinth of high strangeness, I feel it's our job and our right to explore that mystery. So let's explore now with ET contact experiencer Debra Jordan-Kauble. Debra Jordan-Kauble. It's been quite a few years, my dear, since I had the pleasure of attending a conference by our mutual friend and colleague Vaughn Smith at Ciro in Los Angeles. And I will never forget the conversation that we had, not just about your incredible experiences, contact experiences that we're going to get into, but I learned a lot about you and your foundation and your resilience and your bravery, your courage. We're going to talk about all that today. I'm just glad to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I retired basically in September last year, so that's
Congrats.
good. Yeah, I feel good, and I had some health issues last year, mid-year, and finally, after 3 surgeries and 2 hospitalizations, I've gotten it all resolved, and I feel better than brand new. I'm just, really revving up and getting ready to go.
Revving up and get ready to go. Well, this is a great, thank you for sharing that with us and continued Godspeed. That's great.
Thanks.
We need you now more than ever, Debra, because of all that we're going through on so many levels. Courage is what we have in you. Courage in sharing your story, which you just told me off air. You've been sharing this story that you're going to share with our audience for 38 years. And I said, journeyers, I call my audience the journeyers. I said, if there's any way you can give us a condensed version, because there's so many moving parts and I don't want to exhaust you, but I say I don't think there's any way of avoiding it. Let's begin at the beginning. The beginning, which wasn't your beginning, you would discover, but June 30th, 1983, nearly 40 years ago, your life changed. What happened?
Well, I was living with my parents, and I was a single mom, had 2 little kids that were, preschool age. And I was living with my parents, and I had been sewing with a neighbor behind us who was a friend of mine for extra spending money. And I was on my way to her house one night to cut some patterns for her. And I was standing at the kitchen window, washing my hands and getting ready to leave. And I noticed a strange light in the pump house of the swimming pool in my parents' backyard. I made a mention to my mom, and she didn't seem too concerned about it. So I left, and I decided to go ahead and check it out one more time before I left, just to make sure, because I was about to leave my mom alone with my 2 little ones. My dad was working the second shift at a local board plant. So I didn't, really want to, I was thinking of prowlers, burglars, not aliens or UFOs, not by any means. And so I drove along the side driveway, because it's a sandstone tri-level. So it had a split driveway. One part went down to the front and the other part went alongside, back and around in front of my dad's workshop and the swimming pool. And then, back, I went to the turnaround and came back through, and everything looked okay. And I didn't see anybody, but I did notice that the pump house, or the pedestrian door to the garage, was now open. And I knew that was not supposed to be open. But instead of stopping, I went on ahead and went to my friend's house, and I called my mom and I told her, the pedestrian door is open. I did not see anybody out there. And she said, don't worry about it. Your dad will be home soon enough. I'll just lock the doors and everything will be fine. I'm like, okay. So I hung up the phone, and just as soon as I hung it up, it rang again, and I picked it back up because I was just standing there with my hand practically on it. And it was my mom. And she said, I want you to come home right now. And I said, why? What's the matter? And I'm sure my friend and her husband could hear my alarm at hearing my mom like this, because my mom was not one to be dramatic or scared. So, and my friend's husband said, hey, tell her to call the police. That's what we pay him for. And she heard him, and she said, no, I don't want anybody here but you. And I'm like, okay. So I got my car and I went back. I got out of the house, or I got out of the car and I went into the house in the little side Florida room where mom was. And I grabbed a shotgun that was next to the trash compactor, because I knew it was there. I also knew it wasn't loaded. My mom said to me, that's not loaded. And I said, yeah, but whoever I come upon isn't going to know it till I'm close enough to hit him with it. So I went out there and looked around. Again, I'm not thinking about anything weird. I'm thinking about prowlers. And that was a out of character for me, because I was not. And I'd probably do that. But back then, no, that is way out of character for me. I don't know what came over me, but I did it. And I looked around the yard, didn't see anything, checked out the pump house, and it looked normal. I did find my dog, who had been in the garage out under my dad's ladder truck, but she wouldn't come out from under it to me for anything. So I just left her, and I went to the garage. I went in and walked around and started looking around. Didn't see anybody. And I suddenly felt hot. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I got to get out of here right now, because I started feeling strange. And when I hit the open doorway, something hit me in the chest, like a ball of light that was so intense that I know my eyes were closed. They had to be closed. I mean, that would be your normal reaction, but yet I could still see it, and it hurt. And I could feel the way I described it, I could feel every single individual molecule of my body vibrate, all independently of each other. I could feel it. And it started in my middle gut and spread down my legs and my arms, around my head, and all this intense light. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm dead. I just remember thinking I'm dead. And I don't know how long that lasted, because time like literally stopped for me at that moment. I don't know how long that lasted or how much time passed, but it finally stopped. The vibrating stopped. The intensity of the light got a lot less painful. And I realized I was a little bit farther out on the patio now in the doorway. Somebody had pulled down on my right shoulder from behind, and I could feel it felt like a burning needle shoved in my head through my ear. I was just messing with my ear a little while ago because it still bugs me sometimes. But that's when I noticed what I thought were like children in the yard moving around. My vision was horrible. I had big splotches of white in my vision that I couldn't see
since you got sort of zapped
with that light was so intense. And it was like getting my picture taken with one of those old Polaroid flash cubes, and I didn't blink in time, and it got the full blow effect. But I could see movement out there in front of me, and I thought they were kids. And I thought to myself, why are these kids in our backyard? Why are these kids in my mom's yard? And they were coming from different directions in the yard, and they kind of lined up in front of me a little bit off to my right, further up in the yard. But then they kind of just sort of glided down in front of me. They weren't coming at me, and I was watching them. I saw a ball of light in front of me, maybe 20 or 25 feet in front of me, about as high up off the ground as I was tall. I'm 5'3". And it went down really slow, and it came right back up and stopped where it started. And I felt in that moment that it was looking at me for some reason. I don't know why. And then I noticed this thing. Well, and we've called it a craft for 38 years because of any lack of any other way to describe it. But thinking back, I don't think even 6 little kids could get in this thing and fly anywhere because it was just that small. It wasn't much bigger than the swimming pool pump house.
What was this? You called it a craft. You're not talking about the mark, are you? Or
no, I'm not. The mark showed up a few days
we'll
later.
get to that. So what did this thing look like, this object?
It was egg shaped. It was narrow. It was wider in the center low, and then got smaller. It was just shaped like an egg. And then the bottom part of it, I couldn't tell, but I got the feeling that it wasn't completely on the ground, because I thought I could see some kind of wavering of the movement of it, but I couldn't see real good. I could only, and it could have been my eyes that was doing that. But, and it had a couple long skinny things coming out of the middle of it that were on the ground, but I wasn't sure what those were for. I mean, they seemed too skinny to be holding weight. So, but and I don't know what it was. I don't know how all those little guys got in there and where it went. I don't know, but all I can do is tell you what it looked like. And it had a ball of white light on it. I remember I didn't want to look at it. I thought to myself, oh shit. When I saw it, I thought, I didn't want to look at it. I couldn't really move my body, but I could move my eyes. And I thought, I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to see it, but I didn't not want to see it because I needed to know where it was in relationship to me, if it was coming closer to me or, that's just the things that I remember thinking. I didn't want to see this. I didn't want to not see it. And, I remember at one point thinking, I heard a voice, and I never saw anybody speaking to me, but I heard a voice from behind me say, it was unfortunate that I had felt this pain. And then at another point, I remember thinking, oh my God, my kids. And then the same voice says, your children are fine. That I shouldn't worry about them, but your children are fine. And the next thing I remember is I hear my name being called. And as soon as I heard my name, it was like someone snapped their fingers, and everything that I just described to you, I forgot. I don't know how that works, but that's what happened. And I remember turning and walking up the sidewalk, the back patio to the second set of steps to the upper porch where my mom was actually had her head out the kitchen door. And I later found out it was her that had called my name. And she asked me, is everything okay? And I remember saying, yeah, it's cool. But I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to sew anymore. I just want to get wet. I just feel weird. And so I talked to my friend and I said, hey, how about instead of sewing, let's go swimming? She's like, okay, that sounds good. So I go back to her house. Her and her daughter come back and we're walking across the backyard and she steps on something and her daughter steps on something in the yard. And her mom thought maybe she stepped on a bee, but we couldn't see anything. And she was complaining that her foot was tingling and then it was getting numb. And Deanna's like, get your foot in the cool pool water. If it's a bee sting, that'll help it feel better, And, but we never did see anything. And all three of us were starting to feel kind of queasy. And we were only in the pool maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe. And I remember my eyes started burning. And I remember starting to see halos around all the outdoor lights. The outdoor lights had come on. It was dark now. And I remember seeing halos around them, kind of like I don't know if you ever did this when you were a kid, when you swim underwater with your eyes open and the chlorine too much, you'll see halos around. Well, that's what my eyes were doing. And they felt like chlorine burning, but I hadn't gotten my head in the water and opened my eyes. So I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew I didn't feel great. And they didn't either. They were kind of feeling, I remember Deanna saying something about feeling queasy. And then she's like, let's go to White Castle. You know what White Castle is? Yes. It's like a 24-hour burger joint. They make these little square hamburgers that are
Midwest, particularly. Yeah.
Oh my God, they're open 24 hours, and I'm like, okay, let's go to White Castle. She's like, maybe we'll feel better if we get something to eat. Well, we never made it to White Castle. That White Castle run was aborted, and they ended up going home, and I went home. And the next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swelled so bad that they were completely shut. They were running and I was in so much pain. My mom took me to the emergency room. And I remember when we were in the emergency room, there was a doctor in there. I think he was an actual eye doctor. And I don't know why he was in the emergency room, but he said, I remember him asking my mom if she could take me across the street to his office, because he had an office across from the ER, the hospital, and that he would be able to he'd be better equipped to examine me because my eyes were so bad. And my mom said, yeah, she took me over there. They got me in. And first thing he asked me is, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? And I'm like, no, I have not. And why would I? And I don't know anybody who welds, And I'm not telling him about what happened the night before, because at that point, I don't remember it.
But you did remember something happened. You just couldn't remember the details?
I didn't remember any of that happening. I remember I felt crappy. I felt weird, but I didn't remember any of the details until I saw the mark in the yard. A few days later, Mom and all of us, it was 4th of July weekend. Mom's house was the one with the swimming pool. My family's tradition was to go out and spend like $400 on Kmart fireworks and annoy our neighbors. So, and have a cookout, and the kids all swam. So we're all doing that on the 4th of July weekend that came up. And so it was a few days later, and the kids all run outside to the swimming pool with their towels. And then my nephew comes back in. He says, Grandma, what's wrong with your yard? And so we all the adults go back out there and look, and there's that mark.
I'm going to stop you right there because I want the audience, for the benefit of the audience, to know it's referred to as the mark in your book. Well, go ahead and describe what it is, and then I want to talk a little bit about what it really could be. But go ahead.
Well, it was an 8-foot diameter circle, and it was out past that lower patio in front of the pedestrian door of the garage, out in the yard. And it wasn't too terribly far from my dad's ham radio tower in town. It was a 100-foot tower. And
interesting.
It was 8 feet in diameter, and there was a 49-foot streak that came off of it that went right across, like diagonally all the way across that backyard, and ended in a perfect arc up by the driveway, the side drive that I had gone down previously. And it was the streak was about 2 feet wide, and it was uniform all the way, and the arc at the end was perfect. And all the grass inside it was just kind of laid down. It wasn't crushed or crumbled, but it just looked like each blade had just laid down. and turned this weird grayish beige color. And the dirt under it was hard as a rock and had a slightly weird smell to it. I mean, so hard. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And I'm out there with a spade. And my BFF reminds me later here, recently we were talking about, she goes, remember we were out there with your mom's tablespoons trying to dig the stuff up, and we ruined all of her silverware. So that's when I got the spade out, and I'm jumping up and down the spade, barely dusting up little chunks of it. That's how hard it was. And there was a crack on one side. Like it almost looked like some of the dirt had been pushed, kind of. And there was a big crack right down the middle of this pushed up dirt. And I had like a foot long school ruler. And I thought, well, let's get down here and see how far down the crack goes. Well, I dropped the ruler and it disappeared. I couldn't even see it with the flashlight. It was gone. So I don't know how far down this soil mess went. And it stayed there. That mark in the yard remained for a couple of years. Snow melted off of it the first year that it was there. Every time we'd have a snow, inch or two of snow, within 30 minutes, you'd look out the window and it would just like appear like a crop circle in the
I was going to say, what you're describing is almost like with the blades of grass kind of laying down. That's sort of typical of if they're authentic crop circles, what you see. Let's fast forward just a little bit, because there's so many moving parts to your story, Deborah, and I know we're not going to be able to get to everything, but I want to get to the point. We know something weird was going on there with this mark, and I dare say this is a highly charged EMF situation going on. But let's talk about when that mark served as a trigger, when the floodgates opened for you. If you're enjoying this episode, along with all of the subjects that we cover here on Higher Journeys, then I invite you to join our members-only community on Patreon, where we go even deeper into the conversations with the guests that you know and love. Not only does your membership ensure that we can keep this work going and growing, but you'll also get immediate access to our exclusive after shows. Get up close and personal with the guests of the show, along with many other member perks. So click on the link below to join now, or visit higherjourneys.com, where you'll find the Patreon link. We'll see you on the journey. Thanks.
It was as soon as we saw it, and everybody was out there, my whole family was out there looking at it going, what the hell? And my mom says, oh, that's where our UFO landed the other night. And I looked at my mother and I said, what? Because I remember thinking, why did she say that? And then, boom, I started to remember that night. I remembered the light. I could see two big black eyes like superimposed over this mark as I'm looking at it. And it was at that point I felt like I lost my mind. I mean, none of this made sense. And I think I really feel like I had a nervous breakdown in the few weeks that followed that. I started to remember things about that night. I started to remember what I just told you, the whole thing about the light and the craft thing and the kids in the yard. And I also started remembering some strange things that had happened to me when I was younger that I had forgotten about. I just like filed it off in some place in my brain and said, I don't know what that is. And okay, let's move along. But all that stuff started coming back, and I started having, I already had anxiety problems from teenage years. And that came back with a vengeance, panic attacks, not being able to sleep at night, dreams that made no sense, and worrying about my kids. I would lay in their room between their twin beds at night, wide awake until the sun came up. I couldn't sleep if it was dark outside. Once it was light, I was all right. I couldn't go to the bathroom in that bathroom upstairs that overlooked the mark in the yard because I felt like somebody was going to pull me out the window. And I didn't remember having feelings like that before. It was terror all the time, and I was out of control. I had read, or I should say I had attempted to read Missing Time few months prior to that. And every time I try to read it, I'd have a panic attack. But I kept thinking my older sister had an experience in 1965 where she remembered pulling into the church parking lot and there's a whole UFO right above her car. And she said that this thing picked her whole car up with her in it. And then the next thing she remembers, she wakes up, it's dark out, many hours have passed, and now it's time to pick mom up from bingo. I mean, and she told us this story for years, and we believed her. She had no reason to make it up. But whenever us little kids would pick on her about it, she'd get mad and she wouldn't say it. She wouldn't talk about it anymore. But so I kept thinking of her when I read Missing Time, thinking, okay, this might have happened to my sister.
What led you to get that book, Debra?
I don't know. I was a single mom and I did not have any money. And at one point when I lived in the apartments, I lived across the street from a library. And I used to go over to the library like all the time and get books for me, books for my kids, because it was free entertainment and something to do that didn't cost any money. So I'd get books and I picked up Missing Time. We've always had, my family had always been interested in like ghostly stuff. My mom liked Sylvia Browne when she was on TV in the 80s and stuff like that. Anybody remembers who Jean Dixon was? My mom used to say things to my dad like, "What, I look like Jean Dixon?" Psychic stuff. Not too much on aliens, but more psychic and things like that. So, I mean, I was raised around that. And I also was raised where we had a lot of weird paranormal things happen. And
you talk about that in your book. That's
right. To me, that was normal. I thought everybody's lived that way. That was just life. It wasn't until I got to school and started telling people about it that I realized I probably shouldn't say. I don't think that everybody has this, but
more people than will admit. Some of the people that laugh at you, I'm convinced they're in denial about their own experiences, but that's another rabbit hole we don't have to go down right now. Let's talk about that intergenerational situation. Let's just go to the heart of it, Debra. Your sister had the experience in 1965 that she can recall. There's probably more. Talk about your mother a little bit. I mean, your dad, your mom, your aunt, your cousin. We're talking about a classic case of generational contact here, right?
I think so. My mom was adopted, so there's not a lot known about her actual birth family. She was adopted by a master sergeant in the Army when she was 2 from Louisville, and then was taken, and she lived in China for a couple of years. She lived in Rhode Island. She lived wherever my grandfather was stationed. That's where she went. But my mother did recall, and it's funny, she never said anything to any of us about this until Bud came during one of his visits.
Let's talk about Bud. Let's talk about enter Bud Hopkins. Everyone knows who that is. Go for it.
He just knows just what questions to ask. I mean, and non-leading questions. And he asked my mom about something, if she'd ever remembered anything strange in her childhood. And she immediately said she remembered being chased through the woods by a little boy and feeling very afraid, more so than she probably would have been if she was just being chased by a little boy. I don't know. But and then she didn't really elaborate. I don't recall her saying much more after that, but I thought that was strange, that she talked about being chased by a little boy. And then when I was like 5 or 6, I had an encounter with a little boy as well. And then my grandmother always swore up and down that my dad was psychic. She said he was born with a veil over his face, and I had to look that up to figure out what that meant. I guess the thing was all still intact when he was born or something. But she always told the story of one time when he was a little boy. He did not want to go to school because he told my grandmother that the neighborhood was going to catch on fire, and he didn't want to leave her. And she, of course, made him go to school. And sure enough, by the time he was to come back from school, a bunch of houses on the street were on fire. And my dad always said he could smell death. And when my mother passed away, I was with her in the hospital. Because I knew it was coming. I knew it was close, and I wasn't leaving because I lived 50 miles away. And I spent the night with her the night before. And at midnight, I hear this commotion in the hallway, and I look out, and here's my old man hobbling down the hallway. He woke my brother up, and he made my brother bring him to the hospital at midnight. And I said, "What the hell are you doing here, Dad?" And he said, "Your mother called me." And I said, "No, she didn't. I've been sitting next to her all night, and she's been asleep." And he goes, "Did I say she used the phone?" I said, "Okay." And she passed away at 11 o'clock the next morning.
So you obviously are part of a legacy of experiencers, not just of ET contact per se, but a whole litany of experiences. You talk about this in your book. By the way, I want to give a plug to Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders. I want to talk about Bud Hopkins and how you got hooked up with him. So much there. But here's one of the points I want to make about that. You make it very clear, Deborah. I've heard you say this before in talks, and you mentioned this in the book, that you feel that there's a correlation between the contact phenomenon, the abduction phenomenon, and other paranormal-esque experiences. Talk about that for a little bit, because you've had so many different types of encounters, not one size fits all, definitely.
No, I've had a weird life. I wanted to title my book Weird Life, but the publisher thought that probably wouldn't be the greatest title. I'm like, why not? It's true. But yes, I do. I feel that way. Obviously, like I said before, we've had what people consider paranormal things happen all around us all my life. And I just took it for granted that everybody could see these things and had these happen. When I found out that maybe people aren't talking about it like I do, but for instance, like the craft in the backyard, so to speak, I don't feel like that was something that people fly from another planet to get here. And I felt, I don't know how to put it, because these things came to me in dreams. I would have dreams, lucid dreams, and waking thoughts that would pester me until I'd write them down about, things and the world around me. And I felt like someone was trying to teach me that what I think is the world around me is only just one teeny little sliver of what's really going on all around me. And that, like the encounters that I had, like in the backyard, and when I saw the blue guy in Mom's landing upstairs, and when the two black-eyed little big-headed gray guys came in my bedroom when I was a young married person. Also, I had less than a year after I had the dream, it wasn't a dream. I remember them in my room, the two guys with the black box. They said I'd see it again and I'd know what to do.
Talk about, let's stop, because you're giving us so much stuff.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, there's so much. That's what I'm saying. Deborah, bless your heart. How on earth
hard.
have you? It's hard, but it's also, there's just so many different layers, and yet they seem to be all connected.
They are all intertwined,
They're
and it's
all
like
intertwined.
an onion with that onion layer upon layer upon layer of life and things, and they're all connected.
The two gentlemen that came into your room with a black box, was this what you deemed to be men in black?
No, these were gray.
These were
These
gray
were
type
gray
things,
things.
but you have had a couple of encounters that you believe were government connected. Yes, you want to talk
Yeah,
about that?
I believe they were humans. I can tell you what I saw. I don't know exactly who they were connected with, but they were people. At least I think they were. They looked like
Give us
humans.
a little snapshot of what happened on one occasion, if you would.
Oh, I was, this one guy had been chasing me for months, and I finally gave in. And we dated and talked, and I agreed to go to his cabin he had down southern part of the state for a weekend. I'm a grown woman, my mom watched my kids for me while I was going to go. And we got to the driveway of his house. We pulled up, and I thought I saw somebody like goofing around in his shrubs or bushes around the cabin. And I remember getting out of the car and saying, hey, I think there's somebody out here. And I know he looked over the car at me and his face looked shocked. And then the next thing I remember, I can't see. I feel like I'm being drugged, and I feel like I'm being driven somewhere. Then I feel like I'm on a giant elevator going down and down. You know, that feeling of dropping when you're on an elevator a long way. And when whatever was covering my head is removed, I see a long hallway with lots of tile and glass and chrome. I see glass with wire in it. I see a slot that the guy puts a card in, and the doors kind of swing open extra big. And this was a long time before the key slots at your hotel. This was this was a long before that. And then being in this room, and then I realized that I was conscious, but I couldn't fight. I don't know what, I was like zombified. And they cut my hair, they took my nails, they scraped my skin, they just took stuff they just went all over me. And I noticed there were other tables. I realized I was in a huge room that was separated by glass walls with other tables. I didn't see any other people. I was the only one, but there were a bunch of them. And then it was a giant room. And at one point, this man, and I will never forget his voice. It was deep country Southern drawl. And he was an older man. God, he's probably 100 years old now, because he looked like he was, I was a kid, basically. And he had all white hair. His face was kind of ruddy reddish, and his nose kind of reminded me of W.C. Fields, kind of bulbish-ish, Because I remember studying his face, and he says to me, oh, looky here, you got a little bug in your ear. I'm going to take it out and you're going to feel a lot better. And he pokes me in the ear, same ear that I got jabbed in. And the same one that bugs me all the time. And he pulls this thing out and he shows it to me. It's like on the end of I think I said it looked like it was on the end of a roach clip, like a long pair of pliers with this little pinch thing on it, He said, look at that. And at first it looked like a mosquito or something, with legs. And then the legs kind of went away, and it was just this teeny weeny little ball. And he said something to me, and then he said, you'll feel a lot better now. And I said, he said, I don't even know why I'm bothering to tell you any of this, because you're not going to remember none of it. And he kind of laughed. And I said, I am. I will remember it. I will never forget this. And the next thing I know, he was like, okay, knock her out. The next thing I know, I'm waking up and I'm in my, this guy's living room on the couch. And I look up over the couch and I see a bunch of red lights. And at first I don't know what I'm disoriented. Then I think, oh, he was an EMT, wherever it was he lived, on his, like a volunteer.
The person that you were spending the weekend with.
Yes.
Right.
So I thought, oh, that's his scanner. That's his police scanner. But he gets up, he fixes coffee. He doesn't speak to me. He acts like he is completely freaked out. And the date is over. He took me home. He's like, come on, I got to take you home. We have to leave. I'm like, okay, why? He's like, no, something's come up and I've got to go. So you're going to have to go home. He drove me all the way back home. It was like an hour or so ride, maybe a little longer than that. Dead silent. The most awkward ride I've ever been on. And I told my friends, if he could have just slowed down and shoved me out the door as he drove past my parents' home, I think he would have. That's how much he couldn't wait to get rid of me. And I felt like hell. I felt like I'd been hit by a train. I felt horrible. My head hurt. Everything. I felt like I had the worst hangover on the planet. I felt miserable. And I just fell asleep. I took a nap, and I realized I started remembering all this stuff, this weird stuff. And the more awake I was, the more I remembered.
You said you
And
would remember. You said you would
I
remember,
told
didn't you?
him, I am hard-headed, but um,
My goodness.
uh, you know, I never heard from that guy again. He never called me. I talked to my friend who had she had introduced me to him because they worked together, and he transferred to a different plant. She didn't see him anymore. She never talked to him, and then he showed back up at the plant one time. It was a while later, quite a while later, and she said he looked completely different. He'd like grown a beard, and
Do you believe something happened to him? Let's back up for a second,
yeah,
Deborah. I could stay on this part of your multifaceted journey for a while because this is very curious to me. A, do you, it sounds like there was a superimposed encounter on top of the fact that, so you were at this cabin going away for a romantic weekend, and next thing you know, it's almost like you bilocated. It sounds like what you described was being on a craft with a being that looked human, but maybe was a non-human intelligence. But somehow this guy was aware. Do you think somebody came and kidnapped you? Do you think the beings may have come and kidnapped you and he witnessed it? What do you, I'm sure you racked your brain trying to figure out how this happened.
I did. I've racked my brain for it for a long time. I talked to my friend Rhonda about it multiple times, and she knew him, you know, for a while, and she was the one that convinced me to give him a chance because he really liked me. He thought I was cute, and you know, he was more affectionate than I was used to. But I thought maybe that's a good thing because I am not the greatest. I have had at that point. I hadn't had the best, you know, choices for men in my life. So I thought, oh, okay. She convinced me to give him a chance, you know, and he really liked me. I really felt like it, and the look on his face right before I went black was one of sheer terror.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it was because, you know, of him, what he saw. I don't know what he saw. And he never told me, and I have no idea. And I don't know if he was a part of it. I kind of feel like he was not a part of it
Mhm.
because of the fear that I saw in his face
Mm, mm.
when right before I blacked out. I kind of, I want to say that, you know, he was an inadvertent, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. You
Mhm.
know, who it was and what it was, why it was done, I'm not sure. I don't know. I can tell you what I remember, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't some kind of screen memory or something else.
Well,
The
you've
thing,
talked about that. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
there was an odd thing that happened later that was kind of somewhat connected to this. It was years later, and I was uh, giving one of my first time, you know, I hadn't been out speaking very often, but I think it was in Dallas or somewhere in Texas, giving a talk. And there was a question and answer session at the end. And, you know, I was pretty new at it. But I noticed these two guys were in there, and they both had sunglasses on in the auditorium, which I thought was kind of weird. But, and they had on suits. And during the question and answer session, one of them stood up and said, "Where did you get this information?" And I said, "What do you mean? Where did I get the information? I was there. And I'm telling you what I remember. I'm telling you what I saw." And they both got up and left. And I got the creeps from it. It creeped me out really bad.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody else really paid much attention because people were like firing questions at me. But afterwards, when I was walking from the auditorium to my hotel room, which meant I had to walk outside, I suddenly got so paranoid and I got so freaked out because something in my brain clicked, and I thought, I think one of those guys might have been that doctor or that old guy that
That took the bug out of your
I
ear?
saw that I saw when they were taking the bug out of my ear. Yeah. I thought for a minute it was either him or somebody with him that I recognized. I got so paranoid that I think I actually even called someone and said, I'm kind of freaked out. I wanted to know, you know, those two guys in the dark suits with the sunglasses on, do they come to there often? Do you know who they are? You know, because I was like kind of wigged out about it.
Right. I have a
Yeah.
feeling we need to take a little bit of a break because this is, this is heavy for all y'all that are watching. It may be heavy for you. You can pause it if you want and take a breath because this is like a lot. But we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, I want you to give our audience a little bit of a taste of your incredible journey with the now late Bud Hopkins. So let's take this quick break, and we'll be right back. We are living at a time of great challenge and incredible opportunity. A time when taking life into our own hands, charting our own course, and finding our own answers is more accessible than ever before. During this time, you may be asking yourself, what am I called to do? What if I could discover not only my own inner healing power, but help others all over this planet discover theirs? We all have the ability to heal ourselves, but it takes a special approach, a unique approach. Quantum healing hypnosis technique, also known as QHHT, a method developed by pioneering hypnotherapist and past life regression expert Dolores Cannon, is the approach that thousands have used and taught to access the deeper aspect of the self for healing at the core level. We all have the ability to tap into the higher self, the oversoul, the higher consciousness, and we have the means to help others to do the same. QHHT is designed to help the individual access the subconscious, the storehouse of all information, through visualization at the deepest level imaginable, a process that Dolores Cannon discovered and refined during her decades of working with individuals from around the globe. Training with QHHT will provide the guidance and give you the tools to help others tap that incredible force within. Now, you can access this exclusive training online, bringing the tools needed right to you so you can assist others in finding their own answers and achieve total healing. This is powerful and needed now more than ever. Be a part of the pioneering work and legacy of Dolores Cannon by learning QHHT. Start today by clicking on the link in the description of this show to get started. And when you do, don't forget to mention Higher Journeys to get a 10% course discount when you sign up. It's time we all take back control of our lives and chart the course for success at every level. It's time to discover the power of quantum healing hypnosis technique by helping others to help themselves. And by doing this, we are helping to heal the world. Hi, everyone. We're back with our amazing guest, Debra Jordan-Kauble, telling her hell of a story, a true story. We were just talking offline, and you're 62 years young with another 62 to go. And let's hope that the latter 62 are a little bit more even keeled and what we call normal. But I don't know. This is your world. This is your world, and it's an amazing journey. As a matter of fact, this is all based, by the way, on Deborah's brand new book. I would say it's pretty new. It came out in May or June. Called Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders. And when I say the word intruders, that would be the title of the late Bud Hopkins, a landmark book of which Deborah was the central figure. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into Bud's story. But before we do, speaking of your beautiful book, I want to play a little message from someone that wanted to say hello to you. So let's listen to this message, and on the back end, we'll continue talking.
Hi, Deb. Congratulations on the success of your new book. I was so happy and proud that I was part of it. Thank you for asking me to write the foreword. And I'm also very proud of you for your bravery and coming forward and going through everything you had to go through. Like so many people, I admire whenever anybody wants to come forward just to help the next person out there. So keep up the good work, and I'll see you soon.
Oh my God.
Surprise!
That is so sweet.
Yvonne is a love. As soon as you confirmed that you could do the show, I said, I'm going to call Yvonne up and make sure that she says a little something. And she was delighted.
Oh,
And I'm talking to the audience now. You need to know, if you don't already, that the woman that is sitting before you right now, this beautiful woman with the most beautiful eyes, by the way, I might say.
thank you.
My mom used to say the eyes are the window to the soul. You've got a rich soul. The courage that you have exhibited, not just right now, but for years, culminating in this beautiful book, is one that I know God is smiling on, Deborah. And when Yvonne says she's honored to know you and proud, I know she means it, because Not everyone can do this. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this show and others like them, to show people it's okay to discuss these things. This is one of the reasons why you're doing the work you're doing, yes? Because you want to help other people not be so inhibited by their experiences.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, with each step of the book that I wrote, that I would pray, God, please make the right things come out of my mouth. Make me type the right words, because I'm, like I told you, I don't feel like I'm a writer, and I'm not highly educated. I'm writing like I talk, and I talk from my heart. And
only way to do it. It's beautiful.
And I, every time I've gone and spoke publicly somewhere, before I go out there, I'm like, you put me here for some reason. So please make something come out of my mouth that makes sense to somebody. Because, I feel like I was born to do this. Then what I want to do is I want people to, no matter how crazy you think your story is, there's somebody out there with more crazy stuff, I promise you, and I'm probably one of them. And don't be afraid to speak out. I've been talking about this publicly now with my own name since, 92, when I came out with the first book that my sister and I wrote together. And I just feel like I feel blessed, because I was lucky. I had the support of my family and friends and neighbors and coworkers. And, because most of these people experienced something with me,
Yes.
most of my experiences have been not alone. And so I'm blessed in that way, because so many people aren't. And it's so hard for so many people. I've heard so many stories over the years. And just like we were talking about before, with this disclosure now, and all these pilots are starting to step forward. They're getting fed up with being threatened, because they know what they saw, and they're credible witnesses, and they need to be taken seriously. We are credible witnesses, and we need to be taken seriously. And I want people like me to not be afraid.
That's right.
To see me. And if somebody wants to come at me, come on. It's okay. The universe put me here, and I have full faith that the universe is going to protect me and guide me through whatever it is I need to do while I'm here.
Here. Amen, girl.
And I just want people, like me. I'm just a regular person. I'm probably I might even be your next door neighbor, and you don't even know it. I worked all my life. This is not how I make my living. I don't make money from this. I have worked real jobs, 50, 60 hours a week, my entire life. I worked since I was 15 and a half years old. And I've raised kids, and I have grandkids, and I have a home and a husband and 2 Yorkies and a cat. And I just, I have a regular life, but I try to keep it all in perspective. But I know for a fact that this world that we're living in is not what we think it is.
Not at all.
And I want people to wake up and realize what's going on around them. There's no such thing as synchronicity to me, and the universe speaks to you. You just have to learn how to listen to it. And I just, a whole bunch of stuff opened up inside of me. And I felt like in writing the books, the reason I did it was because I wanted to reach out to that other person out there that was like me back in 1983 and say, you're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And here, take my hand, and we'll go together.
Bud Hopkins wrote the introduction to, was it the book that you wrote with your sister initially? He wrote the introduction. I want to read a quote from him that struck me really, really heavily. It was at the end of the introduction. And then I'm going to have you give just a couple minute overview of how you hooked up with him, and how you're the one who really, I'm going to put it on the record, launched his career. But let me quote his career, I should say, as an in-depth researcher. He said in part of the introduction, quote, "Over the years, I've learned many things from my investigations into the UFO abduction phenomenon. I know that some kind of non-human intelligence is interacting with us, but on its own terms, telling us only what it wishes to, and manipulating us with cold objectivity. I also know that some part of our government is aware of these intrusions and depredations, but for its own reason is deliberately denying this fact to the public at large. There is a sad and depressing parallel here. The government lies and the aliens lie. Each apparently has a hidden agenda. Neither can be trusted. It's a pretty heavy statement. What did you think when he wrote that? And then actually, before you even answer that question, tell the audience very quickly, if you can. I know because it's so long. How did you hook up with Bud Hopkins? How long did the relationship last? It was a platonic love affair, but one nonetheless, I would say.
Oh yeah. I after the June 30, 83 incident, the book Missing Time came back to my mind immediately because I knew there was a place in the back where you could write to the guy if you thought you'd had these experiences. So I went back to the library and I got that book, and I came back and I wrote him a letter, and I gave it to my mom for her to mail. And eventually she did. And he called. And I remember I was out when he called. Mom took the message. And as I dialed the phone number, my hands were shaking and my heart was pounding. I could barely speak. And as soon as I heard his voice, I knew everything was going to be all right. And, from that point on, I went to New York a few times. I had to sell my washer and dryer to get that I had in storage to get enough money to go on the bus the first time. And then he came to our house several times and interviewed neighbors and all kinds of people. And, he had testing done on the soil. He had testing done on me. He managed to get somebody to donate. I don't know whether they donated the actual testing or the money to pay for it, because I didn't have the money. I had a CAT scan and an EEG, and I had verbal and written psychological testing done. And eventually down the road, I had something called a voice stress test, which is kind of like a lie detector test, only I think it's set up a little differently. And, I was so fortunate to have him in my life. Not only did he do all that stuff, but he also listened to me, and he connected me with other people who were professionals, because he was an artist. He wasn't a psychiatrist. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't any of those professionals, but he knew those kind of professionals, and he connected us people like me with those people. First thing he did when I got off the bus the first time, before I even went to his studio, was he took me to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Clamar, and in New York. And he cared. He was a compassionate, caring person. I always swore up and down that he was an experiencer, that he'd had. He's like, no.
That's come up before. He would always deny it.
Nope. He said, I had a sighting back on the Cape with friends, but that's it. And I'm like, well, there's got to be some other kind of reason why you're so thrusted into this in this way. We were sitting in his studio one day, surrounded by boxes of letters, and he was showing me people's letters that had described exactly the same things I had described him in my letter. And I looked up to him and I said, why did you answer my letter? Why did my letter end up becoming this book that you're working on now? All these whys. And he said, well, kid, because he called me kid, that's the $64,000 question. That's what he said. And then I looked at him, I go, you suppose it was destiny? And he goes, could be, and he was just a wonderful person who cared, and he connected me with buddies. He had a buddy system set up, and he used to conduct experiencer, therapy group sessions, just for people to get together and talk and share. Mm-hmm. He hooked me up with a lady. Her pseudonym in the book was Mary, and she was older than me and farther along in her experiences than I was. And she was, she's like, call me anytime, day or night. And I did. God love her. A couple times, hysterical, but it was somebody to help me, and somebody cared, and I was blessed to have him for 3 years before it just kind of took off. We didn't want a book written about our family. That was not why I reached out to him. When I reached out to him, I was desperate. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I just wanted to be normal and be a normal person and have a normal life and raise my 2 boys by myself normally. And I was desperate. And that's why I reached out to him. And after the investigation, he's like, this needs to be a book. This is important stuff. And I need to reach out, and people need to know this. And me and my family are both like, no, I don't think so.
But you let it happen.
Eventually we let it happen. The pseudonym was to protect our kids and our family.
Kathy Davis, right?
Right. But then, when I wrote my own stuff at that point, and I'd become somewhat of a researcher as an investigator for MUFON, Indiana for 10
That's right.
years, I'm like, no, if I'm going to be taken seriously and people are going to listen to me, I have to own it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I say, I have to put my name on it, because any other way is just not good enough. And that's why I said, okay, it's coming. Buckle your seatbelts. I got approval from my family and my kids and stuff first. They were older, and I still was very protective.
Mm-hmm.
I still was very particular about how often. I didn't go out and speak a lot, but when I felt the compulsion, I got asked to speak a lot of times, a lot
I'm
of
sure.
radio stuff and going around speaking. Some I said yes. Very rarely I said yes. And most of the time I said, no, I'll pass. Thanks. But it was those times when I accepted it. It was because something told me, you need to do this one, because
Mm-hmm.
somebody is going to be here that needs to hear this. And
I
so
love it.
that's how I rolled for, 25 years.
Yeah. I start every show before the show saying a prayer. Dear God, let this conversation go where it needs to go for the highest good of all involved. Let it go where it needs to go. And I knew that. I'll tell you, it was your recent appearance on Linda Moulton Howe, another mutual colleague, her show about a month or so ago. I said, I know her. I said, I've got to get her on the show. But afterwards, I said, I think I know Deborah. And it all came back when you, me, and Mary Rodwell were hanging out, sitting in I forget the name of the venue at the Ciro conference. It's a very small, intimate conference, having a wonderful discussion. I said, that's the woman. So,
That's me. I love
so
Mary.
I love her too. She's kind of stuck over in Australia right now. She had been going all over the world, but obviously in this new world we're living for the time being, she's staying put, but she's good. Everything is okay with her.
Good.
Um, as we're going to wind down a little bit before we go to the Patreon after show, and I'm going to give a plug to what we're going to be talking about their journey is, because it's going to be equally fascinating. I do want to get your comment on that quote that Bud made. He made a very, very strong statement. The government lies, the aliens lie, and there's got to be some way I'm adding words now, but there's got to be a ways of bringing the truth to the surface. What do you think about the statement that he made, and what are your thoughts on that generally?
Well, generally speaking, he ain't lying. I mean, it's true. The statement is it's a truth, because we already know, on the government side, we already know about that. But also, Bud was in the emergency room of the entire thing early on. He saw people that were train wrecks like me constantly, and I'm sure it had kind of a negative effect on his spirit, that he was more focused on the negative side. You know what I mean? Because he was so empathic and compassionate and wanted to help people so much,
Mm-hmm.
and he felt my pain. He cried when I cried. You know what I mean? He was that kind of person. And so, and how many thousands of people did he see, before he passed away?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said I was lucky to get him so
Yeah. Well, I think
much to myself for so
you put him
long.
on the map. I'm going to say it again. Not you weren't the very first one, but you were one of the first, particularly of this caliber. Let me take that back. The depth of your story, he really took an interest in. It became Intruders, the book. It became a mini series, guys, on CBS. You were so humble. Bless your heart.
Well, I
And so
believe
let
he's,
me toot your horn.
well, I appreciate that. But he was, he was telling the truth as he saw it, and he's not wrong. But I feel like it's bigger than that, and I feel like there's, 38 years later and 38 years older and wiser, I feel like there's more to it than that. It's bigger than that, and I think there's more players involved. I think there's different life forms. There's different agendas, some not good, some not bad, some neutral,
Mm.
just being, being. So, and And so, but as far as his statement goes, no, he's, he's not wrong. And I'm sure, because obviously, somebody doesn't write a foreword or an afterword until they've read your manuscript. And I'm quite sure there were a few things in my original manuscript that he probably cringed a little bit when he read, but he allowed, he was like the greatest dad in the world to me. He allowed me to express myself and feelings and go where I always wanted to go. But he always used to say, don't ever give them credit for what you did, in my strength. And I understand that. Now at my age, I understand why he said that, and he's not wrong there either. But
have you heard from him since he's passed?
Yes, one
Can
time.
you tell us?
I will. I would love to. It's so funny because I never dreamed about him when he was alive, and we had this understanding. I got a letter in the mail a few months before he passed away inside of a book that he sent me, the latest book, Art, Life, and UFOs. And he wrote this beautiful letter to me. And basically he was telling me goodbye in the letter. And he didn't have a very strong belief in the afterlife or God or anything like that. He was kind of atheist, and he was kind of like where when you die, you just poof, you're gone, and everything's fine, And I always used to tell him, I don't know, I think there's more to it than that. And he's like, oh, okay, it's all right. But it was so strange because it was right after I finished this manuscript, finished it. And I was like, yay, I finished it finally after all these years. And he and I were and I had a dream about him, and it was one of my lucid, vivid dreams. And we were sitting on a patio table, beautiful sunshine, palm trees. He looked young and vibrant and healthy and happy. And I remember there was a breeze blowing through his hair. And I said, Bud, is that you? Oh my God, you look fantastic. And I said, is it like I told you it was? Remember how I always used to tell you it was? And he'd smile, and it was like a bobble, not a yes and not a no, but a big smile. And then I realized this dude is wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And I started laughing because the Bud Hopkins I knew would never wear a Hawaiian shirt. All I ever remember him in was the little blue and white pinstriped, button up shirt and the sweater. But I looked at the shirt a minute, and then I looked at him, and I'm like, oh, I get it. It's a metaphor. That shirt means paradise. You're telling me you're in paradise, right? I'm right. I'm right. And again, he just, kind of bobbled his head a little like he did, and big smile on his face. And I'm like, oh, we had a conversation. I talked. He never said anything to me, but I was just running my mouth like I do. And he says, and I said, oh, I finished the book. I finally finished it, And he's like, kid, I'm proud of you, kid. Mm-hmm. And then I woke up. But it's so weird because when I woke up, not only did I realize that this message was for me, that he was proud of me and what I had done. And he was trying to tell me, I'm still here. You were right. But I felt like I needed to tell Leslie Keene this message as well. I don't know why. So I sent her a message and told her this whole dream. And I said, and for some reason, I feel very strongly that he wanted me to also tell you that he's proud of you too. Wow. And she wrote me right back, and she was like, oh, thank you. I'm sure it was him, and it's wonderful. What I did not know at that time was when her book, the one about life after death, was she was in the process of, I think, it being on some kind of television show.
Netflix. I think the show, the series is on Netflix now. Yeah.
And that was going on at the very exact same time. And
so the dream was recent.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Oh my goodness.
No, it was right before I finished this. And, it's weird because right after I finished the manuscript, almost immediately I had a publisher. And that's the same thing that happened the first time. And that doesn't happen in journalism. At least that's what everybody who writes books tells me. But so I'm sure I've got help from the other side or from the next side. There are many sides, not just one. So
Wouldn't he love to be here right now? I'm sure he's living vicariously through perhaps both Leslie and you. Look at what the story that Leslie broke, the story in the New York Times.
mhm.
Let's end on this. Speaking of that, your thoughts on what's happening right now in terms of the uptick of discussion in the phenomenon we're calling now, deemed the UAP phenomenon, the task force report that is, I think the consensus is, at least in our circle, a whole bunch of nothing. But I have said and will continue to say, it's not what was in the report, it's the implications of why the report is being talked about. What's going on right now? What's your gut telling you about what's really going on?
My gut tells me that while, yeah, 9 pages isn't squat, and it's almost kind of, a slap in the face in a way. But like you said, I wasn't, I was fully expecting everything I saw, but what I didn't expect was what I didn't see. And that made me happy. To me, with these people, it's baby steps. And that was one little baby step forward, because they didn't say it wasn't. They didn't say what it was. They didn't. And I feel really strongly that, years back, they would have not thought twice about it and had done before. It's not this, it's not that. But they didn't do that this time. So that made me feel hopeful. So even though, it looks kind of BS-y, but it made me feel hopeful. It also made me feel like that this toothpaste ain't going back in this tube this time.
Well,
No,
I love that. I
they
love.
can't.
I don't think it is either, and I
Mm-mm.
think that it's. I think we're in for even more of a wild ride. Not that it.
And this is important. I mean, and the things I'm doing, things people like me are doing and speaking out now and trying to get people come out and tell your story, because this is part of what's going to keep them from being able to walk it back again like they
That's
did
right.
in Roswell. There's power, there's strength in numbers, and
strength
there's
in
too many
numbers.
of us. There are millions of people out there just like me, millions.
There's strength in truth as
A-
well.
And yes, and so, and I think at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, what we'll be able to get out of it is that nobody saw this coming. What you're going to learn is going to be something you never expected,
Gonna stand you on your ear.
and it ain't what you think it is.
I agree. I agree.
I pray to God I live long enough to see it.
I think you will, because I think we're right around the corner, girl. I really
Yeah.
do.
I uh
I really do. Well, look, Deborah, what can I say except please come back soon, because we barely scratched the surface.
I
We
know.
barely scratched the surface. And in the meantime, journeyers, I say get this book, Extraordinary Contact: Life Way Beyond Intruders, even though Intruders was really good. Isn't it true, Deborah? I think I just heard you say that both Missing Time and Intruders was re-released by your publisher that published your book?
Yes, right.
Yay!
Talking about synchronicities too. He was working out that deal to do that before I even contacted him. And then right in the middle of his working on that, here I came out of the blue, and he was like, "What?" To me,
Wow.
that's the universe speaks to you and
There's a
says
lot
that
going
you're
on.
on the right path. When I found out that about August Night Press, I knew immediately
There
this
you
is
go.
where I need to be. This is who I need to be with.
Absolutely. Oh, what a blessing. So we
Mhm.
will make sure, Deborah, that we have obviously the link to your wonderful book, but also the latest or the re-release of both Intruders and Missing Time, so you can get it. And I heard you say, and I agree, if you are even remotely interested in this subject, you absolutely have to have these books in your library. So there you go. Now, very quickly, because we've gone over time, but that's okay. We still just scratched the surface. We are going to continue this, everyone, over on the Patreon after show. And guess what we're going to be talking about? Because this woman who is so doesn't want to talk about toot her horn, I said I'll do it for her. Worked with MUFON. Look, I mean, the resume is really long. She's got skin in this game, and is also a, what can I say, an expert in EVP. That would be electronic voice phenomena. She sent me some EVPs that I'm telling you guys, will stand you on your ear, the clearest I've ever heard. We're going to take that to the after show. We're going to talk about EVP, talk for a little bit about surrounding the recordings that you sent me. You were obviously there. You did the recordings, and why you feel yourself to be an extra sensitive transmitter and recorder when it comes to these EVPs. So we're going to say ta-ta for now for the main show. Heading on over to Patreon after show. Come join us and let's have a little conversation about EVPs. Debra, tell us the website real quick where we can learn more about you, because I know you got a good one before we sign off.
It's www.debshome.com.
Deb's Home.
Come to my home and we'll hang out. And
All
you can
right.
email me through that too.
Awesome. I'm sure there are going to be some folks that want to hook up with you. So, all right, my dear. Thank you ever so much for this amazing journey. My God. And it continues. It continues. So I'm going to sign off for now. It's Higher Journeys. Thanks for joining us. We love you all. Debra, I love you. So glad to see you again.
Thank you. I love you too.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.